Jesus Trilogy, Book 1, The Four Messiahs, Chapter 55. The temple was quiet. The moon was nearly full. A beautiful bright night was in progress. The massive temple of Solomon seemed to glow in the dark. The huge foyer was quiet except for the noise of footsteps. The temple guards paced back and forth across the smooth marble surface. They would cross in the center of the huge floor and click their heels when they met at the respective far walls. Their billowy, colorful costumes belied their stern demeanor. They were known as the fiercest soldiers in Judea. As they were trained to do, they would stop at nothing to protect the great temple and its treasures. 4 guards were constantly circling the temple in the outer court, 2 each in the foyer, 2 in the main sanctuary. 2 guards were also stationed at the entrance to the most holy chamber. Only the ark resided there, and only the high priest was allowed in. The story of Uzzah had been recounted down through the centuries, and it was believed that touching the ark, or even setting eyes on it, meant certain death. Therefore no guard was there. Guards worked in 4-hour shifts, and they were paid well. This added to their loyalty and their fiercely protective nature. Gadira's cousin Beldar was a member of the elite temple guard. Gadira had convinced his cousin to let him be a temple guard this night. They were of similar build, and once uniformed, wearing helmets, it would be difficult to tell them apart. At the change of shift, Gadira would take Beldar's place as one of the sanctuary guards. He would then patrol the midnight to 4 a.m. shift. Ro, who had been in the temple that day to worship, hid in the upstairs balcony and waited for the proper time. The plan seemed foolproof, but as with any plan, there always seemed to be a few glitches. Ro had hidden under the balcony bench for 5 hours. The temple closed at sunset, and he lay still, essentially motionless, for 5 hours. He had gotten terribly stiff on the hardwood balcony floor. He also had to suppress several sneezes, this aftermath of a spring sinus infection. The 6 Points had spent a lot of time fine-tuning this plan. They knew it had to be performed perfectly or it wouldn't work. Ro was the best physical specimen of the 6, and it was decided early on in planning stages that he would be the one to do the wall work. With Gadira as the impostor guard, they felt no further help was necessary, but just in case, Omar was stationed outside the main gate, disguised as a beggar who would conveniently fall asleep. Terah would somehow work his way into the most holy place and observe from there. He had hidden behind the corner of the curtain, and after dark eased along the wall behind the curtain until he got to the opening into the most holy place. He was a Hebrew, but thought the mystique of the most holy place was hogwash, and had volunteered himself to hide there. Besides, he was curious. The other 2 charter members of the 6 Points gang stayed at home. Abel was too well known, and Uz was just too old. They all had been over the scenario 1,000 times. Abel had assured them it would go like clockwork. He was far more worried about the part his son would play. As midnight approached, the guards were beginning to feel the fatigue. 4 hours of constant marching was difficult even for men of this caliber, but they kept on their steady pace, knowing full well that even a break in step would cost them their jobs, and possibly their lives. The guards for the next shift usually arrived a half hour before the change. Gadira had shown his pass at the main gate. It was a counterfeit, albeit a good one. He'd gotten dressed a full hour before the change. He sat and read as the others came in. He grunted answers, hoping no one would notice he was not Beldar. To his surprise, no one did. The head guard for the shift was a big guy named Londor. He clapped his hands together to get the attention of the other 9 guards. "All right, gentlemen, is everyone ready?" They all nodded and snapped to attention. "You, Beldar," he said. "Yeah," Beldar, Gadira grunted. "Your belt's on backwards." The others turned and began to snicker. Londor came over to him. Gadira's face was red, but the helmet obscured all but his eyes. He was shaking like a leaf, sweat beading on his forehead. He began to feel the trickle running down his cheek. "You okay, Bell?" Londor asked, standing right in front of him. "You sound funny." "A little cold," Gadira said, a fake cough coming and hoping Landor would believe him and get on with things, and so he did. "Company, march!" Landor snapped, and the 10 marched in out and stepped out of the changing room into the main sanctuary. Gadara was out of step, but luckily he was in the back of the column. He had made sure he was on the right side of the two-man column. This would put him on the right side as a sanctuary guard. He must be on the right side to carry out the plan. The change went smoothly. No hitches. Gadara found himself marching back and forth along the right-hand aisle. There was a side pulpit of carved teak. The candles glowed, leaving shadows across his path. The moon, nearly full, shone bright on the floor, creating more shadows. Gadara knew he must be ready, for at any time now things would happen, and happen fast. The objective was cradled on a crimson pillow with a gold fringe. It was enclosed in a glass case, and this was suspended from the towering ceiling of the temple with a gold braided rope. During the day it would be suspended at eye level, with 2 full-time guards in constant attendance, but at night, with the use of an elaborate set of pulleys, it would be raised 30 feet off the ground where it would be seen by all the guards, and would thus be perfectly safe. About 15 minutes had passed since the changing of the guard, and Rowe decided it was time to go to work. He eased out from under the bench. He really was stiff. His lower back had been aching for over an hour now. It felt so good to get up and move. As he straightened to a sitting position, his back made a loud crack. He froze, sure that the guards had heard it, but no one had. After a couple of minutes, he began to crawl slowly down the aisle next to the pews. He didn't realize he was casting shadows on the wall to his right, but Tara saw it immediately. He realized Rowe was on the move, but his heart started to pound, fearing the worst. The most holy place guards were facing Rowe's way, but to Tara's relief, they didn't seem to notice. His heart began to slow, but Rowe's was speeding up. Rowe was slowly crawling to the railing and slowly peeked over. He could see the 2 holy place guards talking to one another. He also saw the 2 sanctuary guards making their slow, steady procession away from him toward the huge crimson curtain. He allowed himself a little smile. As he looked over to his right, he saw it. Even in the dark, it was utterly magnificent. He marveled at the moonlight reflecting off it, the tiny points of light dancing as the glass case slowly swayed, thanks to a slight breeze coming in from the south. Rowe remained hypnotized for several moments, but quickly was brought back to reality as Gadara and the other sanctuary guard reached the front of the sanctuary. Both clicked their heels, turning 180 degrees, and headed back down the long aisle. He did not know, but so hoped, that Rowe and Tara were successfully in their place. The 6 points had discussed the possibility of Gadara giving the others a sign, a series of coughs or some such thing. But they decided it was too risky. He just had to trust that everything would work without communication. As Rowe peered down into the sanctuary some 30 feet below, something caught his eye. The crimson curtain moved. First he thought it was from the breeze, but the curtain was too heavy for that. Tara must be in place. The guards continued to march. It's time, he thought. I must start now. The high sanctuary walls were made of massive blocks of limestone dug from quarries in South Judea. They were cut to fit perfectly, but where each one met the next, there was a step-off groove about an inch wide and an inch deep. Rowe was a sinewy man, 5'6" and 140 pounds. He'd done a lot of climbing, and his hands, yes, his whole body was strong like wire. He had worked hard the past few months to build up the strength in his fingers and toes. He would need all the strength he could muster, for he had to traverse the wall inch by inch. He had to work his way 100 feet across the wall to where the Star of David was hanging. He would then throw out a line, draw the suspended glass case to him, and extract the diamond. His best guesstimate had been that it would take him 15 minutes, but he had not counted on the humidity. Combined with the fear he felt, his hands were sweating profusely. He needed some drying powder, but there was none here. He feverishly dried his hands on his coat and peered over the rail again. The guards kept up their monotonous pacing, and the 2 most holy place guards seemed to be nearly asleep. Now was his window of opportunity, and he would have to take advantage. He went to the wall. He got a secure grip with his fingers and his toes and began the tedious journey along the wall. Occasionally his fingers would slip, but he was able to dry them on his clothes intermittently. There was also some dust in the grooves, which helped his grip. He smiled at his good fortune. He looked down and saw the two most holy place guards pointing to the balcony. He was in shadow, but was sure they had spotted him, but neither moved. So he went back to his crawl along the wall. It was not long before he realized what the two had been looking at. He suddenly felt something on his head. He reached up and felt his head. It was something soft and ouch! He yelped softly. He quickly looked down at the floor below. No movement of the guards, but his finger pained him considerably. He looked up and saw the problem. There was a bat staring down at him from the next groove up. Roe rubbed his hand across his hair and didn't feel anything, but his finger was bleeding profusely from two puncture wounds from the bat's teeth. The pain was also excruciating. Roe was only a third of the way to his objective, but he had to go on. Gadara was walking along the aisle when all of a sudden he felt something wet on his ear. He looked up reflexively, then seeing Roe, quickly looked down and continued walking. The blood had splashed on his shoulder. As he neared the most holy place guards, one of them noticed the blood. "Halt!" the guard shouted. "Sir, you have blood on your coat." It was a white coat and very obviously stained. "I cut myself earlier today. Must have opened up. It'll be okay." "Let me have a look." "No, no, it'll be fine. See, it's quit bleeding already," Gadara said. "You sure you don't want to go see the doctor?" "No, it's okay. Just a scratch." "Carry on, then." Blood continued to drip on the floor, but the distraction of Gadara allowed Roe to make some good progress. He'd gone nearly 70 feet, only 30 to go. His hands and toes were aching, but he had to keep going. All Judea was depending on him. As Roe crawled along, a trail of blood formed on the temple aisle. Gadara noticed, but was careful to sidestep it. Finally, Roe reached the glass case, which was suspended right at his level, but 10 feet away from the wall. He devised a little rope with a hook on the end. He had to hold onto the wall with his good hand and use his bloodied hand to swing the rope. On the fourth swing it caught. There was a pool of blood forming on the floor below, but Gadara, though unable to avoid it, realized this would be the drop point. The problem was he was now leaving bloody tracks up and down the right-hand aisle. Fortunately, the light was dim, and nothing was noticed. Roe eased the suspended case toward him. The Star of David gleamed in the moonlight. Just as he was reaching for the case, the rope, which was fairly rough, grated on his bleeding finger. Reflexively he dropped it, and the rope swung wildly away from him. Then it swung back toward him, but not close enough for him to reach. The rope swung back and forth, finally slowing and coming to rest again 10 feet away from him. The glint of motion caught the eye of one of the most holy place guards. He squinted, trying hard to see, but it was just too dark. Wind must have got the case swinging, he thought. As Gadara came by again, he said, "Take a look up at that diamond when you go by." "Yes, sir," Gadara said. Gadara looked up briefly. To his horror, he saw the rope hanging from the case, the diamond gleaming in the case, and Roe secured to the wall. He quickly straightened and walked on down the aisle. His heart was racing, and a sick feeling welled in the pit of his stomach. "Everything okay?" the other guard yelled, having seen Gadara stop, then resume walking. "All's okay," Gadara yelled back, though all was very wrong. Roe saw everything, as did Tara, standing between the two curtains. Tara felt he should try to create a distraction. He had no idea what Roe would do. Maybe he had a second rope, but unfortunately Roe had no such thing. Things looked bleak. They needed a break. Tara decided it was time to gamble. He reached in his pocket and took out a large coin. He flung it across the sanctuary. It hit the left wall and bounced down in front of the sanctuary guard opposite Gadara. Fortune smiled again. The two most holy place guards ran over the noise and spotted the coin. Roe did not know what the commotion was all about, but he knew his opportunity would only last for a few seconds. With every muscle in his body, he leaped into the air. Both hands reached for the rope hanging from the case. His right hand missed, but his left hand caught it. He swung wildly. The cut hand was burning with a searing fire, but somehow he held on. He grabbed the rope with his other hand and quickly climbed the 10 feet up the rope to the case. He opened one of the gold doors and grabbed for the huge diamond. The alert Gadara stopped under the swinging Roe. Roe grabbed the jewel and quickly looked down. Gadara looked up again, and Roe dropped the stone down toward Gadara. Amazingly, Gadara reached up and caught the stone with his right hand. He quickly slipped it into his inner pocket of his coat and resumed marching. Deciding that the coin falling was a fluke, the two soldiers looked up. The swinging Roe caught their attention simultaneously. "Hey, who goes there? Halt!" The two ran over under Roe. Roe dropped the 20 feet to the floor as Gadara also ran back to the other two. As Roe hit the marble floor, he collapsed in a heap. He landed on both knees and then pitched forward. His chin hit the floor and knocked him out cold. The guards were now in a frenzy. They looked up at the case and saw it was open. Gadara ran over and cranked down the rope pulley apparatus. As the case neared the floor, the guards were stunned to see it was empty. They quickly searched the unconscious Roe and found nothing. He must have swallowed the gem. They carefully searched the whole area, but the diamond was not to be found. As they looked near the curtain, they noticed a foot sticking out from under it, black and charred. The guards were never allowed to even look behind the curtain, but the larger one grabbed the foot. He was going to pull whoever it was out, but he quickly dropped the foot and screamed in pain. The foot was like a red-hot coal. He grabbed a cloth and with his other hand grabbed the foot and pulled out the charred body. Gadara nearly fainted as he saw the charred corpse of his friend Tara, eyes burned out, body still glowing with a fiery heat. A careful search of the still-hot corpse also revealed no sign of the stone. It was too big to swallow, the guards decided. Where could it be? The guards returned to the motionless Roe, picked him up, and took him out to the main guardhouse. Gadara went to change as the next shift was coming on. He knew that if Roe regained consciousness, the interrogation would be severe. There was nothing he could do now except go home. His face was a mixture of smile for a job well done and a fear for what his friend Roe might have to go through. He was also sad for his dead friend Tara. The curse of Uzzah was still very real, but sacrifices had to be made. The job was a success even if someone had to die. He clenched his fist around the Star of David in his left pocket and pumped the air with his other. They had done it. Judea's chance for freedom from Roman oppression was still alive.